At dawn the red keep bled rust into the sky. The first light came slow over the Blackwater, pale and stingy, smearing a tarnished sheen across the shallows and the salt-streaked piers. Gulls rode the brackish air, coughed once, then fell quiet, as if even they were nursing hangovers. The city beneath the castle stirred in grudging fits. Rope creaked, a dog barked, a woman poured a slop bucket, a cock crowed and regretted it. King Robert Baratheon stood at a slit window above it all, thick fingers gripping stone, breath hot with last night's wine. His head throbbed in a deep old way that was almost companionable now. He had known 4 sorts of mornings. The kind after victory when everything smelled like clean sweat and horse. The kind after defeat when nothing smelled at all. The kind with a woman's hair in his mouth and a shoulder under his cheek. And the kind that were like this, a dull hammer behind the eyes and a city yawning open with its stink and clamor, reminding him of the work he'd won. He shouldered the pain aside and drew the morning into his lungs until the ache steadied. Far below, he could make out the long spine of the street of steel, and even at this distance he knew it by the way the air glimmered above the forges. A boy in a leather apron was moving there, dark-headed, shoulders broadening into a man's. Robert could not have said what pulled his eye to the boy, only that it happened. The boy bent to a bucket, lifted, poured, steam rose like a ghost, and when the boy straightened he wiped his brow with a forearm and laughed at some smith's curse. The sound small as a pinprick at this height, and yet Robert felt it. The easy set of the boy's jaw, the black of his hair, a memory folded over on itself. A laughing girl in the Stormlands years ago, a rain-drenched morning that smelled like wet iron. His name for these moments was nothing, because a king had no time for naming odd tugs at the heart. He closed his fingers until knuckles whitened. The city was a mire of rumors, and Jon Arryn was dead for the sake of some quiet truth. Perhaps all truths were quiet until they cut. Behind him, the door to the solar opened with the careful hush of a man who had learned to wear his own silence as a cloak. Varys moved without seams, a reflection more than a person, hands folded like a prayer. "My king," the eunuch's voice flowed soft. "You sent for the small council at this hour. Forgive me for anticipating you." "You're forgiven if you can make my head stop pounding," Robert said without turning. "Else I'll throw you off this bloody tower and call it a mercy. I shall brew poppy and willow bark and have them borne up directly. Wine." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Strong and cold at once. Stay." Robert wanted the man's eyes, fox-bright and unblinking. "Tell me truth in this dawn light, Varys. Does the city whisper that the king has whelps scattered in his gutters?" Varys did not smile, which Robert always appreciated. "The city whispers what it has always whispered about kings and gutters. Counts with its fingers and loses track. It dresses tales in colored ribbons. It breathes in rumor and breathes out certainty. Words, eunuch. I want meat. There are children. I could name some you have named with your own mouth on easier mornings. And others you never heard of and would not care to. A girl in the Vale who climbs as if she were born to rocks. A boy in a smithy whose master swears at him in 3 tongues. A babe at Chataya's that looks at the world with your shade of blue, if I may be so bold. And Jon Arryn died counting them, did he?" Varys lay his head a fraction to one side. "He died because he looked upon something that did not wish to be seen." Robert let the silence be. The gulls found their voices again. In the throb of his head he heard an old jest he had half forgotten. "Seed is strong." He had said it himself to any man who'd listen, laughing and clapping backs, as if his own seed were a mountain rolling down over Westeros. He had wanted that to be true the way a boy wants to believe in stags that talk. "Call the council," he said, "all of them, and send for Lord Eddard if he's prowling the yard with that long face of his. We'll have done with whispers. We'll count, and we'll count proper, and we'll count for all the realm to hear." "A census, your grace?" Varys breathed the word as if tasting it. "Aye, of my get. Of any who claim it. We'll write their names and marks and the colors of their hair, and the names of their mothers if they be known, and where they lay their heads. We'll see how many stags are in this city, and in Storm's End, and in the Vale, and all the bloody compass points besides. A reckoning. The city watch will love to be given pens, Varys said mildly. Perhaps your Lord Hand will advise on the manner of it. Perhaps he will. Robert turned and fixed Varys in his gaze. And make certain Renly is there, and Pycelle with his books, and Baelish with his purse, and Ser Barristan to remind us all what a blade is for. Oh, and my gracious wife, if she can be bothered. Varys bowed from the throat. As you wish. Robert went to the table and sloshed water into a wash basin, rubbing a rag over his face with a grunt. He saw his reflection break and reform. A broad man, hair gone thin on top and too long at the sides, beard flecked with gray, eyes a blue faded by sun and wine and years. He had believed once that defeat made a man older faster than any other thing. Of late he thought it was peace that did it, with its soft hands and dull blades. He dried his face, grinned at the hammered metal as if it were a comrade, and went to meet his council. They were gathered in the Tower of the Hand because the council chamber itself stank faintly of piss after a squire had mistaken a corner at the last feast, and Pycelle's apprentices, after much fuss, had only made it smell like piss and lavender. Eddard Stark stood by the Dow, the narrow one where the light fell sharp as a blade. He was all gray and dark. Gray eyes, dark hair lacking any sun's love, the quiet weight of a mountain man set down among red stone. Littlefinger lounged with one heel hooked over the rung of a chair. His green doublet winked, and that was the only thing about him that winked. Grand Maester Pycelle wheezed into one sleeve. Renly had come from the practice yard in a lick of green velvet thrown over a tunic that smelled faintly of horse. Barristan Selmy stood with his hands folded at his belt, the light turning his hair to a white halo, which Robert disliked because it suited the old knight. Jaime Lannister was not present, which Robert also disliked, but he had not asked for the Kingslayer, which was how these things worked. He had asked for his wife, and she came last, in lion's silk and summer perfumes, gold bright as noon. Sit, Robert said before Pycelle could embark on a bow. Out with you, chairs on their arses.
Vari, pour me wine.
I dreamt of wine that was colder than a stream in the north, and you've given me piss the temperature of a hot arse. Renly, stop making eyes at the lady of countless names and pay heed. Cersei's mouth curled so slightly that a man could pretend he had not seen it and keep his manhood intact. My king, she said, taking the chair to his left and making a little show of arranging her skirts. Your king is going to count his bastards, Robert said, just to watch her not blink. It was Littlefinger who laughed, which Robert had expected. It was a thin sound like a knife on slate. Your Grace, we have neither the parchment nor the ink. And if we had, the ink would curdle at the task. Half the streets will bring their brats and swear they're a king's each for a silver stag, and the other half will hide theirs behind bolted doors, and all of them will lie to improve their portions. Counting will become an exercise in sums of lies. Then we will find honest men to do it, Robert said, and honest steel to stand behind them where honesty fails. Counting is a tedious work, Renly said, the corner of his mouth quirking. And tedious work is the only kind I cannot abide. My king is certain this is the best way to spend the realm's patience. Jon Arryn died sniffing along this trail, Robert said. His voice filled the chamber and left its scent behind. He learned something important enough to kill him. I will know what it was. If the truth hides in my gutters behind children's eyes, I will look into those eyes. And if any man lays a hand on a child while this counting is done, I'll have his hand and then his head. Write that in your poxy ledgers, Pycelle. Pycelle dragged in a breath that seemed to start at his ankles. My king, the crown's coffers, to set such men to such a task, and to send letters to the lords of all the 7 kingdoms requesting they surrender to the royal care any natural offspring of the king. I would not. That is, one must consider the dignity of the throne. What concerns your dignity is the weight of your necklace, Robert said. Write the letters. Lord Eddard, you will oversee the work in the city. Choose 5 men you trust among the watch. If that means choosing them from their jail, so be it, and set them to this counting. Varys, you will put eyes on them to make certain the watchers are watched. Baelish, you will open your purse and pay bounties for proper accounting and nothing for lies. How much? Baelish glanced up as if he were hearing rain on a roof. A silver stag for every name. A golden dragon for proof that holds against a father's denial. Your grace is generous. The city will be tripping over kings. Only if a man has carry a warhammer to get to the privy, Robert said. Barristan, you will assign 2 white cloaks to stand over the counting, to show my mind in the matter. If Janos Slint shrugs and says he has no men to spare, you tell him I will find him men to spare him from his post. I will see it done, your grace, Barristan said. Cersei sat very, very straight. There was not a line in her face where there had not been one before, and not a breath that could be sworn was shallower than the last. It was the perfection of control. A census of bastardy, she murmured. What a noble endeavor. Shall we read it aloud in the September when we're done? Or perhaps in the throne room, so the iron can be instructed in the king's love. Robert smiled at her and showed teeth. Perhaps I will read it to you in our bed, wife, line by line. It'll be the closest we've come to a tender night in years. Littlefinger made a sound that might have been a cough. Varys was a ripple in a pond. Eddard Stark said, I'll want writs for the watch, commanding obedience to the hand in this matter and protection for the mothers and their children. Nothing of this is to be done by rumor or done in haste. There'll be no breaking down of doors. Robert clapped him on the shoulder so hard Stark swayed. Your heart has always been too large for your ribs, Ned. Writs, protection. We'll do it as you like. We will do it. I did not come out of the Stormlands covered in mud and loyalties to preside over silences. Pycelle began to mumble something about the faith and the crown's obligation to consult the High Septon on matters of public morality. Renly interrupted him to ask whether morality had ever been found in the Street of Silk when it mattered. Barristan stood like a statue that somehow breathed. Varys leaned into the sunlight as if the warmth belonged to him. Ned said nothing else. He looked out the window. In the thin band of sky, the first honest blue was showing, stubborn as the north. The city took the king's work as it took all royal decrees, with scowl and laughter, with a shrug, with an open hand. Men in the cloaks of the watch went into the Street of Steel and the Street of Sisters, into the Stone Mill and Flea Bottom, and even the Street of Silk with their EY. Esquire Folie Leve. Some carried tablets and had a scribe behind them. Others only had a memory for names and a keen ear for lies. The Master of Coins men set up a table outside the Great September and heaped coins there like sacrifices. Names were given and taken down. Names were rejected. Names were argued over until the man behind the table grew bored and flicked a coin in the air and let it vanish into his sleeve. Varys's little birds perched and listened, and watched for dragon gold passing to the wrong hands, and reported it, and sometimes were paid themselves to stay quiet. Eddard Stark went himself the first day and the second and the third. He walked with 2 of his own guard behind him and watched how the men from the watch watched women holding babies who clung with starfish hands to their mothers' wrists. He listened to a girl with hair like straw sit on a step and tell haltingly of a night 2 years gone when the king had lifted her and laughed and pressed his mouth to her hair. He watched a barber surgeon with eyes too close together and little flecks of blood in his nails point out a child named Bara and name the place where she had been conceived as readily as he would have named the place where he had lanced a boil. Stark's mouth was a tighter line by sunset. On the 4th day, Littlefinger fell in step beside him and matched his pace for 10 paces without speaking, which was how Ned knew the man had something he wanted very much to say. "My Lord Hand," Baelish said at last with a half-faced smile, "I have a gift for you, or perhaps it is better named an errand. For my sins I own an afternoon's worth of courtesy from a master smith. An expensive exile from Qohor, no less. He works a boy who does not look the least like his mother." Eddard's jaw tensed and relaxed. "Tell me the name." "Tobo Mott," Littlefinger said cheerfully. "On the Street of Steel. You see what a good boy I am? Bringing you and a Blackfire in the same sentence. Ser Vardy's Aegon used to cuff me for such jokes. But he's dead now and I dearly miss the man's cuffs." Ned did not say the name that pricked in his mind, John Arryn. He said, "Send no one else there. And next time you have a joke like that on your tongue, bite it." "Ah," Littlefinger said. But I have so little to bite." He made teeth of his lips, flashed them, and was gone the next moment into the jostling shoulder of the city, his cloak a green ghost. Ned went to Tobo Mott's house with 2 of his own men and a boy named Jax who had a tidy hand with a quill and a cold contempt for falsehood. He found the smith in a heat that made the air await. Mott's arms were ropes, his beard black as soot, his face a slab of stone with eyes set deep in it like 2 nail heads. The boy had black hair, true and thick, and when he turned to fetch water his eyes were blue and bright and open as a sky after storm. "What is your name?" Ned asked. "Gendry," the boy said, in a voice that had not quite decided whether it was a man's and a boy's. "Who is your mother?" "A woman," the boy said. Then, after a glance at Mott that wasn't frightened so much as cautious, "She died when I was little. She had yellow hair. She liked to sing." "Who paid your fee at your indenture?" Mott was not quick to answer, but he was not slow either. "I am a craftsman, Lord. I do not take charity." The boy came to me with a purse stuffed too well for his mother's hand. It was a lord's purse. I would swear it. The clasp had a stag stamped on it, and the coin I took out had a dragon on it. I kept the clasp. For luck. A man did not give his name. Ned looked long at the boy, and the boy did not fidget. The heat drew sweat down over the bridge of Gendry's nose. He wiped at it with his forearm and left a smear. He did not know, Ned thought. And then, he knows enough to suspect and makes a fortress of the not knowing. "Would you go to the wall, boy?" Ned asked gently. "If I sent you." The boy half smiled, wary at the edges and hopeful at the center, which made him look like another child in another place, and that made Ned's chest ache. If you send me. No one will send you against your will. But men in black get good meat and sleep warm when they can. They fight beside the best men a boy can learn from. They do not make swords. They carry them." Gendry looked at the steel he had been polishing. Ned watched him look and knew the exact weight of that look. "I like making them," the boy said at last. "Then make them and keep your head low. If a man asks your father's name, tell him what is true and nothing more. Jax, write the name and the mark. Blue eyes, black hair, and the place." Jax wrote with neat disdain. They left Mott with a look that said plainly he'd refused to leave his forge to save his life. Ned could respect that. He had known men in winter who would not leave their hearth even when the snow rose to cover their doors. He came out into a midday thick as soup, and Varys flowed out of nowhere at his side like a shadow learning to speak. "The queen is displeased," the eunuch breathed as if it were news. "She thinks the counting vulgar." Ned did not keep his voice low. "The queen has thought many things vulgar, and many of those things have turned out to be duties." "Indeed." Varys placed a hand on his heart. "I took the liberty of sending a bird to Dragonstone. Lord Stannis is a man who appreciates counting. He has a taste for columns and sums." Ned stopped on the cobbles and stared at him. "By whose leave?" "By the leave of the realm, which I serve as humbly as any man," Varys said without blinking. "A census of the king's natural issue touches upon the line of succession, which is a matter the master of ships may regard as within his purview, if he is in the habit of regarding waves as lines drawn with chalk." Ned could have had him whipped. It would have been like whipping dusk. "You will tell me when you send birds, Varys, or I will clip your wings." "My lord hand." Varys bowed with a sincerity that might have been real. "I would beg you be careful with your quips. Some things a man says at noon become ropes in his dreams." On the 8th day, the great September filled with mothers and children and gawkers and men who would not miss a spectacle for all the wine in the arbor. The high septon did not descend, citing prayer and his gout, but 3 thin brothers in gray stood at the back and whispered to each other like mice. Outside, the square was overflowing, the scent of bread and piss and roses climbing into a humid stew. Baelish's table sat under a canopy, and the master of coin himself sat it, eyes amused and shuddered by turn, while men argued numbers that vanished as soon as he nodded and coins that leapt like fish into their pockets. Inside the sept, Eddard stood with a scribe and a guard and watched an infant with blue eyes look at the world as if it were a ceiling and then yawn as if nothing in it was worth the effort. The mother was called Mhagan. She said the name quickly, as if names were a kindling and she didn't want to set anything alight with an errant spark. She told of a night after a hunt when the king had come laughing and been kind to her and had kissed the newborn's forehead the morning after. Ned's jaw tightened. He wrote all of it down himself, for fear that Jax would cut the words to fit his contempt. He made certain the mother had protection writs and money. He crossed the square at midday to piss behind the September because the line for the privies was longer than patience, and as he buttoned his breeches, he heard a man whispering in the shadow of a pillar. "The Queen wants no more of this, do you hear? The gold cloaks look the other way tonight. It is to be done quick and quiet and no squealing, by orders of the hand." Ned stepped out of the shadow like a knife drawn from a sheath. "What hand is that?" The man started and shoved at someone behind him who stumbled into the light and turned gray when he saw who blocked his path. Janos Slint had a face like a bag full of eggs, features shifting in a way that might have been something and might have been nothing. He bowed. "My Lord Hand, you will repeat to me precisely what you just ordered." Ned's voice was flat and quiet and therefore very dangerous. Slint's tongue flicked out to wet his lips. "There's complaining, my lord. The watch is stretched thin. I told Alade, Talon, to see the streets were clear after dark so no mischief could be done near the counting. The Queen is concerned for the peace." Ned looked at the man behind Slint, who had a knife tucked into his belt in a way that suggested he used it often and for dirty work. The man looked back with watery eyes, calculating whether he could put that knife into Ned Stark's belly and get away with it in the press of the crowd. Ned Stark did not reach for his own blade. He turned to one of his guards. "Find Lord Commander Selmy, now. Bring him here with 2 white cloaks behind him." Slint tried on a smile that slid off his face. "No need for swords between friends, my lord. We are all servants of the king." "Yes," Ned said. "You will go now and collect every man that you have set to any task near Chataya's or the Street of Silk or the Street of Flowers. You will bring them to me in the yard of the September. And you will do it with your own hands and quickly, or I will have you stripped, beaten, and put in chains for treason. I doubt the iron on your skin will be as comfortable as the iron around your fat throat." Slint did not blanch. He did not need to. His whole face was the color of cheese. But he went, feet moving before his thoughts. The knife man hesitated a moment longer and then slid away like oil on water. Barristan Selmy came with 2 Kingsguard, wide-plated and staring forward. Between them they were buckets of ice. Ned told him what he had heard and who had been giving the orders, and Barristan grew still in a way different from his stillness before. "I will have the Queen's answer to this," he said. "You will have the King's," Ned said. "Cersei will say that she has ordered peace in the streets. But it smells of a different peace to me." "It smells of fear," Barristan said. The old knight's face was a map of duty. "I'll stand men at the brothels myself. Ser Meryn, Ser Boros. Send the hound to Chataya's," Ned said before he could stop himself. "He is loyal to the prince, but he hates orders more than he loves princes. He will not like this work, and that is precisely why he will do it in full view of the city." Barristan gave him a quick look that might have contained the ghost of approval. "You are hard in your choices, Lord Stark." "I am a father," Ned said. "They are children." That night the city simmered. Men in cloaks the color of old gold and straw moved and were seen moving. Men in brown moved and were not. Varys's birds whispered thieves cant to each other at ankle height. Sandor Clegane stood outside Chataya's with his long face and burned flesh and watched the doors as if waiting for them to grow teeth and bite. Janos Slint went to his house and shut the doors with hands that were not trembling, which was worse than if they had been. In the Queen's solar there was no hint of night. The braziers burned with pale coals and the walls threw a soft light over everything. Cersei had dismissed everyone but her brother. Jaime stood with his back to the lion-painted window, idly turning a dagger in his left hand. The blade reflected little suns as it spun. "A census of kings, whelps," Cersei said, pouring her wine too slow, as if the wine might learn patience by it. "He will stack them like cordwood, count the knots, and show them to me like trophies." "Let him," Jaime said. "You will smile. You will look bored. He will choke on it." He won't last long enough to put a fool's ledger before a lord's court. He is not the Robert you knew at Pike, she said. He is worse. He has found his taste for something like righteousness, and a man like that is a danger. Even fat and old. A boar can gore you if you put your knee too close. Then do not put your knee close. Jaime's smile was lazy and beautiful, which was the same as saying it was cruel. Put a spear to the beast and have done, like you should have in the first place. Do you think I do not know that? The wine jolted as she set the flagon down. Someone has been whispering to Stannis. Littlefinger plays at being a boy with toys. Varys plays at being a shadow. Slint is a lout for hire and I hired him, and now the hand smacks him in the street as if he were a dog. Do you see the position he puts me in? The Northman with his mercy writs and his grave mouth? He paints me as a monster in the streets, and he paints himself as father to all. They will kiss his boots. They will remember their king when the Northman leaves them to their rats, Jaime said. If you require a thing done properly, sister, say it. Say it plain. I'll do it. Her eyes flicked up. Would you kill your king? Jaime turned the dagger. In the pause, his breathing became the only sound in the room. I have killed a king, he said. It did not take away my sleep. Do not ask me for it unless you mean it. I mean 1,000 things, she said softly. If Robert dies with his hand on a wine flagon and his head in a boar's belly, it will be his own doing. If he dies in his bed of too much wine, so too. He will not die by your hand. Not again. I will not have that tale told. Then what do you want? To wait, and to watch, and to have a little something done to make counting difficult. Do not send Janos, Jaime said. He sweats lies. I know what he sweats. Cersei looked down into her cup as if it hid an answer. But there are other men in this city who can move without cloaks. Let Varys have his birds and Baelish his coin. I have the cats. She had them. They went out in twos that night, and one of them had a scar that crossed his lip and turned his mouth into a sneer even when he was only chewing. They found 2 doors and knocked at one and walked into the other as if they were friends. They took a baby from a breast and left the mother wailing. They took a boy by the arm and called it a question and smiled. They found a knife outside Chataya's and walked past it because Sandor Clegane did not move, and the streets watched him not move and loved him for it. They did their work and made it look like thieves. 2 names went dark on Lord Eddard's ledger the next morning. The city woke to 2 women screaming and a third who had no more voice. Ned Stark set the pages aside and pressed his hands over his eyes until he saw sparks. And when he lowered them, the world was made of edges again. Enough, he said to Jax, who had come with the news and stood awkwardly in the door like a boy who had done a wrong he had not committed. We will move them, all of them who can be moved. We will take them to the Sept and to the castle and put them under white cloaks. Send men now. Varys. Varys had already arrived. He seemed to have no habit of knocking. I am so sorry, he said. A mother and a boy. The one is dead. The other is missing. There will be fingers pointed, and some of them will point at the queen, which will enrage her, and some will point at you, which will enrage you. I would suggest we move quickly between those points, my lord, because that is where men are cut in two. We'll move quickly, Ned said, and to his own surprise he did. The Great September became a nursery guarded by white armor. At the Red Keep, Barristan put 4 of his men at a small hall near the armory and installed a gaggle of wet nurses there who immediately did what they did everywhere. They took command. The noises of babies made the stones seem to breathe. Arya Stark slipped in there once and stared wide-eyed at the line of cots until a woman clucked her out, and she went laughing with Gendry's face stuck for a heartbeat in her mind, though she had not seen him and did not know why. The king came to look at the line of cradles on a day when the rain fell thin and steady and made the world smell like washing. He went with Barristan and Ned, and the guard fell back at a gesture, and Robert walked down the row and looked at each child and made a face at one and gently touched another's tiny fist, which closed around the king's thumb. He did not speak until the end, when he stood with his hands hanging like dead weights and the rain tapping at the windows and a baby's squeal winding up and dying down like a gull's cry. Seed is strong, he said then, in a voice he did not recognize as his. He did not have to say anything else. He was a man who had hunted boars in rain. He knew the thickness of bristles and the curve of a tusk and the line of a trail when it lay before him wet and glistening. "Read the book," Eddard said. He pulled from under his arm a volume as thick as a brick and set it on a table, and turned to a page where lines of names ran like stitches across yellowed pages. The lineages, black of hair, brown or black, across 200 years of crossing. Every Baratheon born to a Lannister is black of hair. And now... He did not finish, but the empty space after the word was filled by Joffrey's face as all three men had known it every day for years, and by Myrcella's brightness, and by Tommen's softness, and by the same light in all three, gold, gold, gold. Robert closed the book. "Bring me Cersei," he said. They brought her. She came alone. Jaime did not come with her. Joffrey did not come. Tommen and Myrcella were with their septa and did not know yet that the world was a thin skin over deep water. Cersei stood with her hands folded over each other and looked a man in the eye as she had always looked men in the eye, as if she could see their shame through skin and bone. Robert looked back, and something moved in his face like a fish in deep water. "Do you love them?" he asked. The question surprised everyone in the room, most of all the man who had asked it. Cersei's mouth tightened. "What do you think?" "I think you love them." Robert spread his hands. "I think you love them more than you love the iron chair or your father's gold or your own pride, which is saying something, given that your pride could fence the trident. That is good. If you love them, you will tell me what I already know so I do not have to put a blade under it to make truth bleed." She laughed then, a small brittle sound. "A blade has been all you have ever brought to our bed." Robert took that like a blow and did not show it. "Say it." Cersei watched him. He had the momentary impression that the whole world had narrowed to the width of the room and that outside it there was only rain, and that if he and Cersei spoke one word too loudly the room would tilt. "They are mine," she said, and the room tilted. "They are mine and my brother's. They are not yours. You were a loud noise in another room." "You dare," Barristan began. "Quiet," Robert said without looking at him. He went to the table and put his hands on either side of the Book of Lineages and looked down at it as if it were a thing that had betrayed him. When he looked up, the rage he'd expected to find filling him like wind did not come. He felt something quieter and more terrible, a draft running under a door. "I could have you strangled for this." "You could," Cersei said. "You could have done many things you did not do. You could have been a husband. You could have been a father. You could have frightened at least one of your bastards into saying your name like a prayer. Instead you stood in front of crowds and told hunting stories and grew fat and drank. Strangle me if it gives you courage." "I will not strangle you." Robert's voice was dry sap. "I will put you away from me. I will call a council and I will name my heir. Not that bastard boy of mine that Penrose coddles at Storm's End. Not your golden son either. I will name my brother Stannis. He is iron. He will not bend." Eddard opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to warn, perhaps to soften, but Robert lifted a hand and stopped him. Cersei's eyes flashed. "Stannis! Stannis!" Robert said. "Send riders. Barristan, you will see to it. Bring him back with a fleet at his back if that's what it takes to get him to look me in the face and tell me I'm an idiot for waiting this long." "I will be a prisoner in all but name," Cersei said. The words were not a question. "You will be confined to your chambers until the matter is settled. You will keep your children with you and they will do their lessons and play with their cats and pretend the world has not ended. If you harm one hair on the head of the babes in that hall down the corridor, I will have your head and I will not blink when I take it. Do you understand me?" Cersei did not answer his threat. She looked past him to Eddard Stark. "You did this," she said. "We did," Eddard said. "We did what was duty." "Duty." She smiled without warmth. "You Southerners use that word like prayer. I prefer the gods that answer." She went then, with Barristan's hand like a clamp at her elbow and 2 guards falling in behind. When the door closed, the rain sounded louder. "Varys," Robert said, "if your birds have left the Red Keep in the last hour, I will clip their wings with my own hands. Baelish, you will find me coin for what comes when Tywin hears this. Renly, where is that peacock now?" Inspecting the guard, Ned said. He is a peacock, but his plume is iron when it matters. He will come to heal. Good, Robert breathed. He had not realized until that moment that he had been holding his breath for years. He let it out and felt lightheaded. Ned, you will write to each lord in the realm with a seal that says the king has named his heir. You will write to Hoster Tully and to John Arryn's widow even though she is a mad bitch and climbs up her own walls like a cat. You will write to Lord Tywin as well. Don't, for the love of the seven, phrase it like a taunt. Whatever you do, do not wake that old lion with a prod to his balls. He will go to war, Ned said. He will, Robert agreed, but perhaps not yet. Perhaps he will blink slow and count the years he could lie in gold and let his son rot in white. Perhaps we'll give him time to blink. There was not much blinking in the days after. The city became a hive. Men darted. Hawks wheeled above the keep and then were never seen again. The queen stayed in her chambers and the door was warded by men who did not look at the floor when a lady-in-waiting sneered. Joffrey stamped and flared and threw a goblet that took a page on the ear and split it like fruit. That night the prince's tutors found themselves replaced by a hard-eyed man from the north who taught sums with a stick on the table and did not look up when the boy sulked. Myrcella wept and Tommen clung to his mother's skirts and hid in his bed with a wooden lion. Tyrion Lannister had not yet returned to the city. Varys observed this with a tilt of the head and stored it away like a nut. Stannis's reply came in 3 letters, one to his king, one to the hand, and one to the master of laws. They were like the man, clean, spare, cold. He would come. He would bring his ships. He would have his rights. He would have truth laid out and each lie beside it like the bones of a fish. He named treason and said he did not kneel to it. He did not flatter. He did not threaten. He did not mention his brother by the old name they had used as boys. Renly read his letter and laughed, then grew sober when he came to the last line. I will have what the law gives me. Law, 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 Renly said. If he had a song to sing, he would sing the statutes. Better than singing himself into a ditch, Robert said. He is a hard man, but hard men are useful when you are trying to walk across a river of shit. Their W. As one day when the counting came close to killing them all, Varys's birds whispered that the queen had ordered the cats to sharpen their claws again, and Baelish's men whispered that the watch had taken coin from somewhere that smelled of Lannisport, and Ned told Robert that they should get the children out of the September and into the castle before the city's hunger turned. The square outside the September was a seething thing, summer heat making it a cauldron. Bread had gone dear that week because of some rot among the warehouses at the river. The crowd pressed in to see the names read out upon a board set up there, and though the letters stood as straight as pikes, the men reading them were less steady. A woman shouted that she had a king's babe in her arms, and that they laughed at her because her babe had eyes the color of mud. A man shouted back that she was a liar who had lain with a baker. Janos Slynt stood at the bottom of the steps and did nothing at all, which was the cleverest way to do a wrong thing. Stones began to fly, little ones at first that clattered harmlessly on the steps, then larger ones that thudded on wood and flesh. Ned was halfway down the steps with Barristan beside him when he heard the voice of the hound above the noise. Back, or you'll taste steel instead of crumbs. And the singing sound of a blade coming half out of its scabbard. It would have gone badly then if not for a thing Robert did that no one in his council would have advised him to do. He should have let his men beat the crowd back with shafts. He should have sent for more men. Instead, he picked up a warhammer. It had been set there like a symbol for the speeches. He lifted it as if it weighed nothing, which it did not, and he went down the steps with Barristan swearing in a way that was prayer and oath together behind him. The press opened because men always opened when a big man who looked like he could tear a head off came at them with a hammer, even if they were angry. In the space he made, Robert grabbed one man who had just lifted a stone and plucked the rock away and then, without thought, thrust the stone into the man's mouth. The man gagged and his eyes crossed and the crowd laughed. Laughed like relief, like the crack of a clogged pipe. Robert lifted the stone out and dropped it, and the man spat and then swore at himself for swearing at a king. Robert laughed too, a big sound that said he was exactly the man they'd thought he wasn't anymore. You want bread? He shouted. I'll give you bread. Baelish will set bread at the 4 corners of the square until the warehouses are unspoiled, and if he cheats you, I'll take the coin out of his hide. But you throw another stone at a child, and I will come into your house and teach you manners with this." He lifted the hammer, and the laughter and the threat hung in the air together, and then people began to move in that slow way that says they have decided not to do something after all. Behind him, Barristan had not stopped swearing, but he was grinning now despite himself. They got the children to the castle that day without blood. After, when the gates had shut and silence had fallen like a cloth, Ned said, "You were a fool." "Yes," Robert said cheerfully, "and I loved it. I will love you less if your foolery gets you killed. You'll love me like a father if it stops me being what I have been." That night, in the slow quiet of rooms where moonlight pooled on floors and the city's snores were muffled by stone, Littlefinger went to the Queen's door and stood outside it with his head bent. He had not been summoned. He had not been forbidden. He simply went because he knew where the lines lay. The guard at the door looked at him with open dislike and, finding that dislike was not a coin he could spend, stood aside. Littlefinger went into a room where a woman sat very straight in a chair that made the gold threads in her gown lie still as coins. "Lord Peter," Cersei said, "tell me why I have not thrown you from a window." "Because windows are for men who misjudge their balance," he said pleasantly. "My queen, I am here to say that I have done you no harm and much good, and because I believe we can still be friends." "Friends?" she echoed, as if she were tasting a new food and found it sour. He spread his hands, palms up, like a man showing he had nothing in them. He made certain she could imagine all the things he had hidden up his sleeves. "The king has named Stannis in his mind. He will name him with his mouth when the ships show their masts in the river. He has put you aside, for now, with our honorable Ser Barristan for your handmaid. Tywin will move. I have gold that can be made to look like grain. I have men in the watch who have learned to enjoy their pay. There is a road between those 2 towns, and I am the inn in the middle. You may need a fire and a bed. And what would you charge for your bed, innkeep? For now, a smile. Later, information, and perhaps a kiss, but only a light one. The hungry wolf has taken your scent. If you would not be run down, let him chase something else. I can find him meat." Her eyes were very green. "Who?" "A brother," Littlefinger said. "Oh, not Stannis. He is eating only righteousness these days, and it makes his breath a horror. The other, the pretty one. Renly has been whispering to the Knight of Flowers about a crown that would fit him better. The Tyrells have bread and vanity and a girl whose hair is like spun sunshine. Wouldn't it be interesting if the city woke one morning to find not a stag or a lion on the banners, but a rose?" "You want a war," Cersei said. "I want many things," Littlefinger said. "The thing nearest my hand just now is a bet on chaos." "You are a fool," Cersei said. "Yes," Littlefinger said, "but I'm a clever one." He bowed and left before she could throw a goblet. She did not throw one. She had broken her last the day before. The fleet came up the river like black tea. Stannis Baratheon stood at the prow of his flagship and watched the walls grow larger and took the measure of them with the cold eye he used for everything. No cheering greeted him. He had not expected any and would have distrusted it if it had come. He disembarked with no fuss and came up to the Red Keep flanked by a small neat knot of men whose faces looked as if they had been planed to an even grain. His jaw was clenched. It had been clenched so long it had become its natural state. "He is iron," Robert had said. "He will not bend." He did not bend when Robert embraced him. He stood and allowed himself to be embraced. "Brother," Robert said, pounding his back. "Brother, you old misery. I've never been so happy to see a scowl." Stannis stepped back. He did not smile. "You took your time," he said, and then, to spare his brother the necessity of making a jest of it, added very quietly, "Thank you." They went to the council chamber with the smell of the sea in their hair. Renly was waiting there, perfectly groomed. He looked at Stannis with the love of a man who grew up knowing he could not please and learned to smile anyway. Stannis looked at him and saw a peacock and a boy who had never had a frost crack the skin on his hands. The table was set with maps. Robert did not sit. He put his hands on the wood and leaned into the room in a way that made everything else lean toward him. "We will do this clean," he said. "We will do it with the law in one hand and a hammer in the other. The Queen will be put on trial for treason. Jaime Lannister will be put on trial for breaking his vows and bedding the Queen. The children will be declared." He stopped and the words caught in his throat and broke. He tried again. "Not mine. They will not be harmed. Your mercy to them will invite contempt," Stannis said. "For you, and for me after." Robert slammed his hand on the table and the sound was like a slap given to a fool. "You think I don't know that? I am tired of being despised by men whose esteem I should never have wanted. I will not kill children." Stannis's mouth pressed thin. "A bastard cannot inherit," he said instead.
No.
Robert swallowed and felt something in him go down like a stone dropped into a well. "I will name you as my heir before the court and the faith and the realm. And then we'll see if the old lion marches or writes a letter." "He will march," Renly said, "and he'll bring the west with him. And the riverlands may splinter, depending on how angry their old trout is about his daughter's husband lying cold by his poor wife's side. Hoster Tully will not spit in my face," Robert said. "Not after all we've done together. And if he does, I will take it and wash it away with ale when the work is done." They sent for the High Septon and for 3 lesser Septons because the High Septon could not mount the steps without weeping and swore his gout had throbbings that foretold ill omens. They sent for Pycelle with his chest of scrolls. They sent for the White Cloaks all but the one who wore his father's golden face instead. Jaime Lannister did not come when summoned. He held the door of the Queen's chamber against 4 men and smiled as he did it and asked them sweetly whether they would like to lose an ear instead of a nose. Sandor Clegane stood in the corridor and watched a thing he had no part in and grinned without humor. Barristan Selmy brought more men, and then more again, until there was a river of steel between Jaime and the world. Jaime opened the door finally because his sister told him to. He kissed her cheek and went with them barefoot and scrambling as if he were a boy running to swim. The throne room was the ugliest room in the world. Robert had said it every time he had to go into it. This morning it was full of eyes. The Iron Throne hunched on its dais like a thing that had been wounded and had healed crooked. The small folk were absent. The great were present, those who had not fled the city or stayed behind their own doors to count their choices. Lord Varys stood near a column and seemed to be thinking of other things. Baelish stood near another and seemed to be thinking of nothing at all, which was a lie. Renly stood with the Tyrell boy at his shoulder, a flower behind a leaf. Ned stood with his guards and looked as if he had always stood that way. Stannis stood apart and seemed to think of the ledger of the world. Robert came in last because he was the king and because he had stopped on the steps to vomit up a breakfast he had not eaten. He came and sunk himself into the iron with a short, sharp sound and let the cold take his back and watched the room with eyes like flint. They brought Cersei in and she did not look at the iron, which was the boldest thing anyone had ever done in that room. They brought Jaime and sat him on a stool with a chain draped over him like a parody of a necklace. Robert spoke without rising. He gave them truth in short lines. "I have been a fool. I have been a drunk. I have been a king as men are kings when their friends die and their enemies smile, and they do not know how to bridge the space in between." He grabbed the iron beneath his hand and felt it bite. "I say this so you cannot say it for me and pretend you're brave. I am done with it. The Queen has betrayed her marriage bed. Her children are not mine. A king's guard has broken his oaths and put his seed in the Queen and protected her with lies. The law of the realm is the law of succession and name. The law says..." Pycelle stepped forward wheezing and began to read. He read and read, line after line, and the words piled up until the room was full of them. The law said what it had always said. It always took a long time to say it. When he finally fell silent, the room's silence rang like a bell. "I name Stannis Baratheon my heir," Robert said. The iron under his hands was slick. "I am not dead yet. But I could see it from here once. If I die, he will be king and any man who says different will swallow his tongue." The High Septon raised his trembling hand and spoke a blessing that missed half its words. Ned Stark's mouth twitched as if to smile and failed. Renly's eyes flicked to Ser Loras Tyrell. The flower returned a small nod. Varys blinked for the first time in an hour. Baelish's lips thinned and then softened. Barristan stood so straight it made his back ache. Cersei laughed. She laughed, and it was not brittle. It was bright and terrible, and she let it spill out and down the steps like wine poured out too fast. You think this is finished because you said it here? You think that because an old man read a book the realm will fold itself into the shape of your will? You have no notion, Robert. None at all. You never have. She turned to go. 2 guards stepped forward and blocked her, and she lifted her chin and looked past them and fixed her gaze on something very far away. Jaime Lannister, seated and chained, watched her with a face like a mask and then, without a flicker, turned his head and spat at the floor, and the spit lay there like a jewel. "Take them," Robert said. "Take them to Maegor's Holdfast. Keep them. Feed them. If a hair falls—" "Yes, yes," Cersei said, bored again all at once. "If a hair falls you will do tremendous and kingly things. We shall see how your courage tastes on your tongue." She went. The room breathed. Somewhere in it a man laughed and someone struck him and the laughter stopped. Robert sagged down and wished for wine. Ned came to him and put a hand on the iron near his elbow, and Robert looked at him. And for a heartbeat there was no king and no hand. There were 2 men who had dug a grave together in a snowstorm and sworn love into the hole with the body. "It has begun," Ned said. "It has ended something," Robert said, "and begun every damned thing else." In the days after, letters ran like rats in the walls of the realm. Some scurried, some bit. Tywin Lannister sent no reply, which was reply enough for any man who knew him. He left Casterly Rock with a host. Varys learned it while the hooves were still being lifted from the straw. Stannis took the port and grounded his fleet along the quay, iron clanging against stone as if to say that 2 hardnesses had found each other. Renly began to take meals with Ser Loras and laugh in a way that meant calculation. Baelish's grain appeared in the square in a way that meant profit. The queen sat in a holdfast and watched her children sleep and did not sleep and did not weep. Jaime Lannister told jokes to his keepers and made them laugh in spite of themselves, which was a small victory. He took to bed each night like a lover. Ned wrote. He wrote to Hoster Tully and to Catelyn in her camp wherever that was now, because the world had been moving while he had been counting, and to Robb at Winterfell, though the boy was still a boy, and he wished in the marrow of his bones that he had never had to write such a letter to any son. He wrote to Ser Courtenay Penrose and asked that Edric Storm remain guarded and not moved. He wrote to the Eyrie and said things to Lisa he would never have said when her husband lived. His quill ate sand. His hand cramped. At night he went and stood with the wet nurses and watched babies breathe, and let the sound of it saw him open and stitch him again. On a morning that smelled of burnt milk, Sandor Clegane came into the small hall with a boy in tow and dropped him in a chair as if he were a sack of grain. The boy sprang up immediately and glared with a pride that was half ignorance. "He was down on the quays boxing some lout twice his size," Sandor said. "And when I told him to stop, he told me to. What was it, boy? Bugger off," the boy said without fear. "Aye, that. It's brave when it turns out to be the wrong man," Sandor said. He grinned. His burn split and made his grin horrific. "This one has iron in him, and the right hair. Thought you might want another king for your nursery." He snorted and went out. "Gendry," Ned said, recognizing him with a flicker of joy that surprised him in its intensity. "What in the name of all the gods are you doing here?" "Working," the boy said sullenly. "Until that great dog bit my day in half. You'll work here while you can," Ned said, "and later we'll see what work the realm offers. For now you are safer under thicker walls." "I didn't ask you to make me safe," the boy said. "I know," Ned said gently. "Few who need it do. In the west an army grew. In the Riverlands, ravens beat their wings bloody, finding men with trout badges and telling them which way the wind now blew. In the north there was snow on one morning when there should not have been, and a boy saw it come down and thought it a sign, because men always think the sky speaks to them when it is only being sky. In King's Landing, the Red Keep became a beehive with too many queens. Stannis worked, which in a king could be mistaken for virtue. Renly flattered, which in a boy could be mistaken for love. Robert drank and did not get drunk, which in a man could be mistaken for growth. Ned kept honest men alive and bad men a little more honest than they had been. One evening Robert stood in the yard with a hammer in his hands for the first time in a long while, not because there was a ceremony to pretend and not because there was a crowd to lie to, but because he wanted to feel the weight of a thing that had made sense to him once. Gendry was there at the anvil, beating at a strip of red metal with a steady rhythm that made the air itself ring. Robert watched the boy for time without measure and then, without speaking, took up tongs and held the strip for him. The boy's blows fell true. When the strip cooled, they plunged it into water, and the hiss rose like a snake. "You have a good arm," Robert said. "I have a good hammer," the boy said, unfold. The king laughed, and felt something in his chest that had been clenched for years loosened by a notch. "You have a bad mouth, so I've been told." Gendry wiped his face on his forearm. Robert put the hammer down gently and stood with his hands empty. "I cannot give you a name," he said, and the words cost him. "I can give you work, and a place not full of men who take coin to sell you. Will you have it?" "I will," the boy said. He did not bow. He did not have the habit of it. Robert found that he did not mind. When the raven finally came from the west, it bore no words, only the skinned heads of 3 of Varys's birds and a strip of cloth cut from a Lannister banner. Varys showed it to the council with hands that did not shake. The room grew quiet. Robert took the cloth and turned it in his hands and felt its weave as if texture could tell him which way a man would turn when the draw came. "Very well," he said. "So the old lion roars. Then we'll answer. I have 2 brothers, and one of them has ships and the other has flowers. There are children in halls with white guards over them. There are boys with hammers who have better arms than their king. There is a ledger with names in it that I will not forget. We will fight, and if the gods are kind, we will do it like men, out in the open sun. If they are unkind, we will do it in the mud and the dark and pretend we like the taste." "Your Grace," Stannis said, in his always hard voice softened by something like respect, "you will have the law at your back. You will not have all the hearts. We will have to make do with obedience. It's a narrower road." "I have ridden narrower," Robert said. He took a breath and tasted iron and ash and a sweetness he could not place until he realized it was hope, which he had not put in his mouth for many years and had forgotten the flavor. He looked at Ned. "I should have listened to you at the start. It would have saved me a hunt and a wound and a lifetime." "It would only have changed which wounds," Ned said. Robert smiled. "There it is. The north. It hurts and tells you why. Come. We'll look at maps and pretend we have control. Varys will tell lies that are true. Baelish will tell truths that are lies. Renly will flirt with doom. Stannis will gnaw the world into order. And I will drink 1 cup of wine and then sleep and not dream about a girl with blue winter eyes under a bloody weirwood." He did not add, "And if I do, it will only be for a little while." He did not need to. Ned heard it in what he did not say, as a man hears a loose shingle in wind. They went to their labors. Outside, the city heaved and settled in its own sweat. The gulls were loud again. The summer would pass. Along the street of steel, a boy raised a hammer and brought it down and brought it down and brought it down, and a strip of hot iron became less of a lump and more of the thing it wanted to be. In the Vale, a girl who climbed like a cat looked at a letter she could not read but knew, by the look on Lady Lisa's face, was a thing the world had been waiting for, and laughed into the low clouds. At Storm's End, a boy with velvet in his voice and a stag's head on his clothes looked out at the sea and did not understand that men argued over his blood in rooms he would never see. He only knew the wind would shift and that when it did the banners would snap in a different way and he might never sleep in the same bed again. The reckoning had begun with a foolish order given hung over at dawn, and for once the foolishness of a king did not lay waste before it. It drew lines where there had been lies. It put white and black beside each other and made men who had grown used to gray choose. In choosing, they would make a new gray because that was the work of men. But for now, in those days when rain fell and ships' masts grew like a forest by the river and babies breathed under watchful eyes, the truth lay clean and cold in the open air of a morning that smelled of wet iron and something like a beginning.